Hello everyone and welcome back to the Parrot Teacher. David here, and today I have a very special guest, and that is Ashley from Pionus Tales. We're going to be talking all things Pionus with you guys. I have had loads of guests on this channel, and I thought it'd be really nice to have someone who has specialist knowledge about this species who not everyone knows much about. There's loads of misconceptions, loads of sort of like common knowledge stuff. We're going to be talking about debunking that stuff in here. So Ashley, please introduce yourself, tell everyone about yourself.
Hello there. So I'm Ashley from Pionus Tales. That is the name of our YouTube channel and all of our social media, basically. I specialize in Pionus, and by specialize, I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form. I do just like to stipulate that. But I do have a lot of experience in owning Pionus parrots. They are the only species I own, and I've done a lot of research about them before going to own one, as well as since owning them and actually having hands-on experience owning them. And because when I was actually learning about them, there was not a lot of information available at all available online. There wasn't a lot of information available in books. There still isn't a lot of information available that's accurate and true. So I wanted to try and actually put somewhere or make somewhere for people to go to get that information that I have struggled so much to get hold of.
It's really awesome because, as we were sort of discussing before we started the call, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of
There is.
knowledge stuff, and it's just awesome that you've done that based on this one specific species, because there's a lot of generalized information out there and a lot about more popular species in inverted commas. But when it
Mm.
comes to certain species, it's not enough. Like, for example, for us, it's crimson bellies. Lots of common knowledge, but we are trying to put out specific crimson belly knowledge because people just hear one opinion on it, and we want people to know more. It's the same with Pionus, I presume, as well.
Yeah, completely agree. There's not enough information about their on Pionus parrots at all. For YouTube channels, there's obviously myself. I was the first, to my knowledge, I was the first dedicated Pionus only YouTube channel, specifically doing content on Pionus parrots. Then I believe there was a second YouTube channel created called Stella and Charlie, who is a wonderful person who lives in Denmark and has a beautiful blue-headed Pionus parrot called Charlie. And they started doing a channel because they got inspired by me. And Stella also has a slightly different perspective because she's actually a veterinary student trying to specialize in avian as well. So she's able to provide a lot extra content that I can't provide on an educational basis when it comes to the actual health and what's the word I'm looking for? I can't even think.
Husbandry, but
Husbandry of parrots, yeah. So
no,
she can provide a lot of different content. She has a lot more general education on her channel compared to mine. I'm trying to put out more educational content, but it's easier said than done. There's a lot of time and effort that goes into it.
it's very true, especially with educational content, because like some people just dash out whatever. But if you want to do it properly, you do have to sort of know and research a bit about it. But I would say, a lot of, based on what I have seen on your channel, based on talking to you, that you do have a lot of specialist knowledge to offer.
Oh,
And
thank you.
just having just keeping parrots for a length of time does give you a lot of experience and does help you to learn about them. Obviously, that is anecdotal because it's our own experience. So I include myself there for some perspectives. But the more you learn and the more that knowledge becomes verified by other sources, for example, like the other account you just talked about, then you can start to say, oh, okay, this is actually a theme. This is not just
Mhm.
my hypothesis. This is more like a theory, and you can start going, oh, okay, this is proven. So I wouldn't necessarily discount any personal experience information. I remember doing a course when I first started this journey, like animal behavior, a diploma in animal behavior and welfare, and there was a professor on there who did a video sort of conference. It's quite a while ago, so apologies if I don't get it right. She did a sort of video conference. She was talking about like actual on-hand experience, not just by students, not just by trainers, but people who interact with animals on a daily basis, farmers, people who may just interact as volunteers. It's all valid experience, and it all adds to the scientific knowledge of animals. On that topic, let's start with Pionus. Let's talk about Pionus parrots in general, because I've learned from you. I have a very basic knowledge of them, but you have a lot more. And I do encourage people to, if you're inspired by watching this video, to go over to Pionus Tales and learn a lot more about them, blimey, because they are absolutely fascinating parrots. I think they're lovely. So let's talk about Pionus parrots in general. Tell us a little bit about them as a generality, maybe just their behavior, how they look, some of their quirks, that sort of thing.
So Pionus parrots in general, I like to point out that there is no generality when it comes to Pionus parrots. They have this stereotype that they're quiet. They have the stereotype that they're very well behaved. They have the stereotype that they're not very destructive. They have a stereotype of being quite shy. And from personal experience and from speaking to a lot of other Pionus owners, all of these stereotypes only probably play a fact for about 25% of Pionus parrots. So, and that's just a random plucked number out of the air based on who I've spoken to. But most of them don't fit their general stereotypes. Like some of them do, like my white-crowned Pionus parrot Quaffle. She very, very much fits her stereotype down to a T. She does have a few quirks that make her not so stereotypy, but most part she does fit the stereotype down to a T. Be quiet, Jinx, that's my cat in the background. Then my bronze-wing Pionus Lyra, she does not follow any of the bronze-wing Pionus stereotypes except for one, and that's the fact that they're more skittish than other Pionus parrots. So in general, Pionus parrots are known for being, as again, quieter, but there's a big disclaimer at the bottom of that, which is compared to other parrot species. Now, that is true. Pionus parrots do tend to be quieter compared to other parrot species. They don't tend to make a lot of noise during the day. They make like a lot of really sweet, cute sounds, like this odd little psh, like randomly through the day. They make a lot of like little chirpy sounds, but they still scream. All parrots scream. I have not met a parrot to date that doesn't scream. There are a handful of lucky owners that have never experienced their parrot screaming, but they are a handful compared to the vast majority. And I'm sure you'll probably agree with that based on your cockatiels and conures, that there is no such thing as a quiet parrot.
No, there's definitely no such thing as a quiet parrot. All parrots will vocalize at one point or another. And there's something very important you touched upon there, that you can draw some generalities about parrot species where there's certain traits which would apply across them. However, every parrot is an individual and you have subspecies and all subtypes. Just because someone says that generally they're quiet may not mean your individual parrot will be quiet. And that's something that I always have to remind myself of, to say whenever I give generalized advice. Like I've done videos on cockatiel behaviors and sounds and stuff, and I've always put it in the description or comments if I can. This is a general guide to common behaviors in them. Your one may have its individual traits. They may have individual variances on those behaviors, and this is just a guide. And all these sort of guides are useful, but again, they're not the bottom line. Like you just stated, everyone's an individual, and you will see differences. And it's interesting to hear the whole generalization that they're quiet, and then you say in comparison. So yes, they're quiet in comparison to, say, a sun conure, but they can still be pretty noisy when they want to. And it sounds interesting, the cute noises. I've heard some of them, very adorable. But do they go into the screaming fits like everyone else? Do they, like other parrots, they just, when they want attention, they will yell for it?
Oh yeah. Especially at the moment, one of my parrots, Lyra, my bronze-wing Pionus, she is currently going through puberty.
Oh,
Puberty is probably when they're the most screamy of all, because just like humans, when they go through puberty, all the hormones in their bodies change and they've got some brain chemical things going on. And a lot of things suddenly start to trigger them that didn't necessarily trigger them before. So, for example, at the moment, Lyra, we were flea flying in the garden and she actually went missing for a night not too long ago. And the reason was because she got chased by magpies. And they actually ripped out half of her tail feathers, which was
oh.
very nice of them. But we found her the next day, thanks to her free flight training. But since that experience, she has suddenly found her voice and she screams at everything. If there's a magpie outside, she screams like crazy. If there's a seagull outside, she screams like crazy. If we have to lock them in the living room while we go and cook tea or go and quickly get changed and we don't want to get covered in birds because they end up plucking at our clothes or pulling at our hair when we're trying to get clothes on, if she can hear us in another room, she'll start screaming, which will then set Quaffle off screaming. They can go for 30 minutes straight. And BirdNerd Sophie just recently made an amazing video about Pionus, not Pionus parrots specifically, but the decibel level of parrots. And Pionus parrots are actually one of the species that can actually damage your hearing with their
Oh.
decibel level. They are loud. They are a lot louder than people realize. And when that screaming fit is going on for 30 minutes straight, and the only thing you can think is my neighbors, my poor neighbors. Hard enough I'm dealing with this, but my neighbors.
I mean, it's very considerate of you to consider your neighbours before your own hearing. So at least they have probably a wall to insulate them from the screaming fit. I mean, we have the same. When ours kick off, we're like, oh my God, not the neighbours are going to be so stressed. But yeah, they all scream, and it's interesting how Lyra had that experience. Maybe worth touching on free flight later, because that's another area where you do a lot more than we do. I mean, we aren't really free flight experts in any way because we don't practice it regularly, but we obviously have some basic knowledge of it. So we'll talk about it later if you don't mind as well.
Of course.
It's interesting how that experience started her on that, and obviously her sort of time of year, her teenage years, so to speak, for parrots is exacerbating the issue. I mean, it must be quite a scary experience for her. So obviously, maybe she feels she wants to be with her flock mates, which is you, Waffle, and your partner, and she's always yelling from you because she gets some reassurance from that. So it could be possible when she's alerting you when these dangers are coming near her. She's like, no, 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 there's something here. We need to deal with that quickly. It's interesting how that happens, and I actually I have no idea that they could damage your hearing. I mean, I know Charlie can when he really wants to. For me, as a crimson belly, again, just there's another myth there. Crimson bellies, you read a lot about online. They're quiet, quiet. They're not quiet when they want to scream. My goodness, will they go for it? And it's probably the worst, most piercing one out of all of them. And my cockatiels, they're pretty good actually. They're when they really want to scream at each other, it goes on, but. Yeah, the Crimsons, and it's interesting to hear that Pionus do that too. So,
No.
so like before we move on to more myths and misconceptions, blimey, tongue-tied. Let me ask you, what is your favourite thing about a Pionus as a species, and what is your least favourite?
My favorite thing about them as a species is their ability to forgive. Like, they're difficult to get a trust with. I've been using the term a lot recently that Pionus parrots are introverts. They're very, very shy. They're very, very quiet in that sense.
Yeah.
But it's because they do get nervous, they do get shy, they don't know if they can trust someone. They are very wary creatures because in the wild, they are a canopy species. They use the shelter, they use the leaves and everything for protection against predators. So they are very, very wary, and they're always very aware of their surroundings. So meeting a new person or meeting someone new can be a very scary experience for any bird. And Pionus parrots have that same fear, they have that same nervousness. But I do find that once you have built that trust and once you have built that friendship and that bond, if you accidentally do something wrong, so I say something wrong, it's not necessarily going to be wrong, but for example, let's say you misread a body language, they will forgive you for it very quickly and pretend like nothing happened. If you have to tell them in order to clip their nails because I have tried and tried and tried to train my girls to allow me to clip their nails without needing to tell them, and it's still not happening. So now they get a nice big reward anytime they do let me tell them to clip their nails. But if you have to tell them and clip their nails, and you have to then put them back, they don't hold a grudge. I know several parrot owners that have said that their parrots hold a grudge against them, and they don't hold a grudge. Literally within a couple of seconds, they're your best friend again. They're back on your shoulder asking for scritches. They are so forgiving to the person that they trust the most. And one thing that makes me smile is you can never guarantee when a parrot in general is going to choose you as its trusted human. For example, I love bronze-winged Pionus. They were my first choice before I ended up getting Quaffle. I got Quaffle out of sheer luck. She just happened to fall in my lap at the right time while I was doing my research and I was looking for a Pionus parrot. And I really, really badly wanted a bronze-wing. I brought my bronze-wing home. I was so excited to get to know her. And then she chose my partner. Oh, for me. And that can be really frustrating because she's less likely to forgive me, but he can do absolutely anything in the world and he is forgiven. Literally nothing stands in his way. But then Quaffle is the same with me, whereas I can get Quaffle out of her bed cage because she trusts me entirely, whereas Jason risks getting bitten if he tries to get her out of her bed cage. So they do form very, very, very strong bonds and they do build quite a lot of trust. The worst thing about Pionus parrots is the screaming. By a landslide. It hurts, especially when they're screaming on your shoulder and it goes directly down your eardrum. Your eardrum vibrates, it hurts, it aches, and you have tetanus for up to 10 minutes afterwards. And when they do that 3 or 4 times in a row, oh, you best believe it hurts. I've actually considered going to get my hearing tested this year because I have noticed a significant difference in my hearing capability in this last year Mainly because if you've seen any of our videos on the Pionus Parrots channel, you know that Quaffle does tend to accidentally scream down my ear on several occasions. She has developed a bit of a habit for it. But even when I'm just sat here at my desk doing some work, doing some video editing, and Lyra is directly behind me on one of these perches, screaming away for 30 minutes straight, even though it's not directly down your ear, it feels like it's down your ear. It's ridiculously loud. That's got to be by far the worst part about Pionus Parrots, is just they don't scream often, but when they do, it is one of the loudest noises I have ever heard because it's just so high pitched. In fact, my friend Fruity Flock, who owns green cheek conures and a black capped conure, she's babysat, parrot sat for me on several occasions. And she said she would never be able to full-time own a Pionus parrot. Not because they aren't wonderful birds. She loves bird sitting them because they're so easy compared to her birds, from what she tells me. But she can't physically handle just how high pitched and painful their screams actually are.
I mean, that does sound rather intense screaming wise. It's interesting you mentioned about the trust element. So they must have maybe something related to the wild where they have very strong flock dynamics, very strong bonds. So when they do form that, that is much more cohesive than other parrots who may have larger flocks. I'm not sure because obviously I haven't studied much into them. It's also interesting about the screaming. A lot of people say screaming is a deal breaker for them and a problem. I mean, it can be worked on. There are techniques to work it. Maybe, you know, there's some things that may help in your situation with it, especially like going forward to the free flight, maybe some descents work around these situations where she'll feel she doesn't have to scream as much when these situations occur. But yeah, I can sympathize there. It is hard when you want to do some work and you're trying to do some work and one of them decides to kick off on your shoulder, or one of them's just screaming because it wants your attention, but you have to get the work done. Yeah, I do sympathize there. It's definitely not the most ideal thing. So, moving on, we touched on this a little bit, myths and misconceptions. The first one we've kind of dispelled was very much that they're quiet all the time. Are there any others you feel that are worth pointing out about the misconceptions about them?
One of the other misconceptions I would say is the fact that they're the perfect parrot. There's a bit of a thing going round that they are the perfect parrot or a great beginner bird, and they are just as hard as any other parrot. They are very difficult. It's like they go through puberty just like any other parrot. They have mood swings just like any other parrot. They get aggressive just like any other parrot. They get highly cage territorial. My God, that's just fetched my brain. Is because they have this nickname of the perfect quiet parrot, people get really shocked and really surprised when they go through their hormones, which happens every year for every bird, and they get highly territorial of their cages and their general territory, to the point where they will fly across the room to attack something they don't like, and they will get little things that they just hate, and they will do anything to just get it. So when Quaffle went through puberty, she had a thing for my phone. She hated my phone with a passion, still doesn't like it, but she's better than she used to be. But if I was on a phone call, I would have to run out of the room before I could even take the phone call. Because if I tried to take a phone call while she was in the room, she would fly across the room and attack my phone, my hand, my ear, anything that phone was touching. She got so angry because the evil phone was back near her cage and in her territory. And again, with the bed cages, they get highly territorial of their nests. One of the reasons that breeders actually struggle to breed Pionus parrots is because of their territorialness and the aggressiveness that comes with their territorialness. I actually read recently in what is dictated the Pionus Parrot Bible, which is this book right here. Amazing book. Highly recommend for anyone who wants to own a Pionus or already owns a Pionus.
What's the book's title? And sorry, just to interrupt. What's the book's title and author? Just so anyone's interested in it.
So it is The Practical Pionus Volume 1 by Russ Shade. It is a fantastic book. Highly recommend it for anyone thinking of owning a Pionus parrot or already owns a Pionus parrot. It has taught me so much, and even though the book itself is 20 years old, it is currently the most up-to-date information we have on Pionus parrots, and the author is actually one of the founders of the Pionus Parrot Research Foundation. So very, very good book. Highly recommend. I'm still waiting for volume 2 to come out, but that's a waiting game. It's not even finished yet.
So sorry to interrupt you there. So you were talking about basically breeders struggle with it because they can become quite territorial of nesting areas, and that's not actually uncommon for a lot of parrots. A lot of parrots are like that, but it sounds like, I mean, if that many breeders have you struggle with it, it would be a quite difficult trait. And again, while I'm ranting about it, I do like the idea that there's no such thing as a perfect parrot. That is a really bad place to start owning any sort of parrot. If you have that sort of perception when you take on a parrot, you're going to set yourself up for failure, because any problems you're going to be like, well, my parrot's different. My parrot's bad. Why is my parrot acting differently to how it's been portrayed online? And it is annoying what you see on social media sometimes about these perceptions that some people perpetrate, not really showing the more difficult sides of things. And yeah, it is. We can probably discuss. We're going to discuss it a bit on your channel, so I won't talk about it too much now. But yeah, it is. It is bad to have this whole misconception about it. You should treat every parrot as an individual, whatever species, and know that they are going to be hard work. Parrots are hard work in general. Even the easy ones come with hard work occasionally attached to them on basic husbandry and training. If you want them to have a great life and enriching environment.
Yeah, without a doubt. I've been talking to Stella and Charlie, the one I mentioned earlier recently, because she was actually having a lot of difficulties with Charlie since January because Charlie's hormones hit like a brick wall. And Charlie has been this sweet, literally perfect little bird all up until this point, and then suddenly all these problems have hit. And as well as the fact they've been moving house, as well as the fact a lot of things going on inside the house, it's been very, very stressful for them in many, many ways. And they're doing an amazing job of battling through it and trying to work through it. But this is what happens to a lot of parrot owners, especially owners of Pionus parrots, when they hit those puberty years between, on average, 18 months to 3.5 years old is when it hits them the hardest and hits them the most. They go from being this sweet, perfect little baby bird to this ravaged teenager that you just want to throw out the window and say, come back when you've grown up. It just doesn't work that way. And it is the most stressful because they don't know what they're doing as parrots. They have all these hormones going through them. They just suddenly feel territorial. They suddenly want to nest. They suddenly have all these feelings that they don't know what to do with. And they do get very aggressive during their puberty years. They go from never biting. And I know several parrot owners or Pionus parrot owners that have said their parrot has never bitten them. But I can guarantee those, or I say I can guarantee, a lot of times those Pionus parrot owners have either owned their bird for 20 odd years and don't remember or don't necessarily remember the puberty stage, or they were very, very lucky, or their Pionus parrot hasn't even hit puberty yet. And so this is another misconception is when you see a lot of parrot owners on the Pionus parrot forums, you'll find a lot of newer owners telling people how sweet and kind and loving their baby bird is. And I'll look and that bird isn't even 2 years old. And just wait,
That's
just
what
wait. Let's see if you still have that bird next year when it goes through all of the stress. Let's find out what happens first. But I personally find that when they do go past the puberty stage, so after 4 years old, Quaffle, for example, my white's crowned, is coming up to 5 this month actually. And she is completely different to what she was like in her puberty stage. She still goes through hormones, she still goes through the territorialness, but nowhere near to the levels of what she did when she went through puberty. And a lot of parrots, especially Pioneers, do get rehomed within the 2 to 3 year marker when they're going through puberty, when they're going through the stage where they don't even know what's going on.
I really wish that's where research helps, knowing what you're getting yourself into, knowing about these terrible, it's just commonly known as terrible twos most of the time, even though it's not twos sometimes. Just knowing that's going to happen and knowing there's a other side to it. But there's something else I wanted to mention as well. When your parrot is having these difficulties, and hormones are natural, we can't get rid of them. They're going to happen. Even during the terrible twos, there are things you can do to mitigate it a little bit. And that is by being aware of their behaviors, being aware before it starts, and being more conscious of what you can do, what you can't do. But there's like, you can have avian teas, which can help. Tulsi's quite good. Chamomile, there's loads of blends by people I feature on my channel, which obviously, you can explore. What other sort of, there's loads of other sort of quick fire tips. And I don't want to talk about it here because it's not a video about hormones, but it's really important to be aware that it's going to happen, not give up on your bird when it does happen, because, we're all going to have difficult periods with behavior. If I had a teenage kid, I wouldn't just throw them out the window and rehome them because they annoyed me. You can't do that with your parrot, preferably not anyway. and, you know, try and do what you can do. And also be a bit compassionate to yourself as well, that there will be difficult times. You know, you will get frustrated, you have to step back, but step back right back into that ring and keep working with them. So, just one last thing I wanted to talk about with you today, because I felt it would be, yes, the one more thing before we do some self promotion, because I think it's more self promotion is always good for guests on my channel. You talk about free flying. Now, free flying is something me and Sophie have limited experience with. We know about it. We make sure we have knowledge of it because we obviously need to advise people on certain things, but we don't do it regularly. So talk a little bit about free flying. I would like, if you can, reasonably succinctly, I don't know how much time we have. We've got a reasonable amount of time left. Talk about what you love about it, what you find challenging about it, and how people should approach it if they're new to it. And if you need prompts on them, I know there's 3 points rolled into one. I will prompt you as well, because I hate it when people do that to me.
I may need the prompts, but we'll go for it. So one of the things I love about free flying is the ability to just be outdoors with your parrot. So the fact that they're not locked up in a cage at home, they're not locked up in the dark, I say darkness. You know what it's like here in England. It can be dark, but the fact that they can get to go outside, they can get some proper vitamin D on their feathers, which does wonders for their health. Like supplement vitamin D doesn't do anywhere near as good as sunshine. So being able to actually let them outside and get that vitamin D, get that experience of the wide world is heaven. But the thing I love most about free flight is it takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of training. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of patience, and the owner actually needs to train themselves as much as the bird. It takes a lot of guts to let that bird off for the first time when the bird is ready, but the owner's not ready. However, I've had a couple of occasions now where Lyra and Quaffle have accidentally escaped from home. And it's not been on during free flight, it's not necessarily been time in the garden. One of the examples was Jason was leaving the house and Lyra broke out the living room and chased him. Went straight after him, flew out the front door, realized, I've never seen this room before. I've never seen out here before. And she was training. We were still desensitizing her. She'd never been outside before. So it was a whole new experience for her. And she ended up flying off and doing a few loop-de-loops and then disappearing. Because of her free flight training, we found her within 3 hours. And same with Quaffle. When Quaffle was going through her free flight training, we actually had a netted garden at the time so that they could be outside safely without the fear of them going missing. And she basically accidentally got blown through a hole in the netting where the netting came up off the wall without me realizing. And again, she beelined and disappeared. But because of her free flight training, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't scared. She wasn't nervous. She already knew the sights. She knew the sounds. She knew what to do. She knew to fly into a tree. Whereas a bird that hasn't been free flight trained or hasn't been desensitized to the outdoors would have just bolted in a straight line and not physically stopped until they were physically exhausted because they would have been so overwhelmed and overstressed by this new world that they've never seen before. So in that situation, we didn't even lose Quaffle. We watched her fly into a tree directly opposite the house. But then because of the fact that she was still in training, she couldn't physically get down from the tree. She worked her way down several places, and then Jason had to go and climb up and get her down. But she basically, we never lost her. We knew exactly where she was. And because of her training, one of the downsides of free flight training is that you have to teach them to scream. You have to teach them to contact call so that if they do go out of sight, if they do lose where you are, you call them and they contact call back to you. And that's the easiest way to find them. If you can teach them that contact call, you can literally just go around going, where have you gone? Quaffle, come here. And you can just hear her screaming from 2 streets away. Like, right, she's over there. Let's go get her. And off we go. And same for Lyra. When Lyra finally found her voice, it was so much easier to find her because originally she didn't like to scream. She's had this very high-pitched whistle, like, so it was able to differentiate from the wild birds, but trying to listen out from a compared to a rah, rah, rah is very different. Very, very different. So it was a lot harder to find Lyra when she went out of sight compared to Quaffle. We don't have that problem anymore, but that's a different scenario altogether. So that's one of the things I love about free flight is if your bird accidentally gets out, you have a much, much higher chance of finding them because they're not scared, because they're not going to panic fly because they're not going to run out of energy. They are going to think smart. They're going to land in a tree, survey the area, work out what's going on. And once they might feel a bit overwhelmed at first, but once they've had a chance to calm down and take in what's going on around them, you have a much, much greater chance of finding them compared to a bird that hasn't been trained. So, as an example, one of my friends who has cockatiels, one of her cockatiels recently accidentally escaped from their aviary. And they found them 4 days later, but unfortunately, they'd been attacked by a cat. And if that bird had been trained, it would have come potentially straight back to the garden or stayed within the area or called back to the owner so the owner could locate it easier. So that's one of the things I love about free flight. One of the hardest things about free flight is the training of the bird itself, because there's a lot that goes into free flight training. You have to learn about the weather, birds of prey. You have to learn about wind. You have to learn about the bird itself. If it's a canopy, is it a canopy flyer? Is it an open air flyer? How much stamina does it need? How much space does it need? Does it need a wide open space like a big field? Does it need trees and shrubbery? You then have to work on ascent, descent, recall. You have to build confidence. You have to build desensitization. A lot goes into free flight training. And you can put all of that training into free flight training. And then when it comes to the day to finally take your bird out for the first time, you as the human can have a full-on panic attack and not be able to do it. That's one of the other hard parts about free flight, is having that gut or having that confidence to know that the training is solid enough for you to take that next step of letting them out for the first time. That is the scariest part, is not knowing whether or not the training you have put in is enough. Not knowing whether or not they're just going to bolt off and you're never going to see them again for that first time. Once you've got over that first step, if you have put in the training, your training is solid, your foundations are solid, and your bird proves that they are able to fly back and two, there is nothing more fun than taking your bird out with friends, taking it on a walk through the woods, on just stopping, letting them play in a tree. You don't even need to fly them. You can literally just pop them in a tree, like, right, you go play, we'll sit and have a picnic, and then they just come back whenever they're ready. It's lovely. We love doing that. There's nothing nicer than just being able to be outside with your friends and your bird. It's really lovely. It makes it no different from taking a dog out for a walk. It's great. So there is that aspect as well. What was the third one?
So yeah, we'll stop there briefly and then we'll cover the third one, because you kind of covered a lot of the third one there, and that was just advice to someone who's considering it. But it sounds really fun, but there's so much involved in it, and there's also that leap of faith aspect. I think a lot of people see it and they assume it's going to be easy, and it's literally just I take my bird out and off it cracks, and it does its thing. It is a lot of work, and generally training with parrots is a lot of work, but the payoff's great. If you do all this work and you train with someone who knows what they're teaching, their experience, they teach you the right way, you can take your bird out. As you said, improve your bird's odds if there's ever an issue. You can enjoy so much more with your bird and then give it that ability to fly. It's something me and Sophie maybe will consider in the future if we were to move to a different area. But this is completely unsuitable for it, honestly. That's one thing we investigated pretty early on. So we tend to focus on flight training around our house and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, it sound like it opens up a massive world. But as with anything that's worthwhile, it takes an awful lot of work. And that was the third point. It was like, what would be your advice to anyone considering free flying their bird? Just one piece of useful advice for them.
So I can actually give two pieces of useful advice, because
Okay,
it depends on you as an individual. The best thing you can do is find a free flight mentor. Now, not all free flight mentors are good. Not all free flight mentors are bad. It's a case of you needed to do the research to work out which mentor is best for you. I personally recommend soaring wings trainings for smaller birds and for birds like Pionuses. Or if alternatively you can't get access to a mentor, see if you can find someone else who already free flies that species and try and get help and guidance from them, because they've already successfully free flown that species, especially if they have multiple free flyers of that species, because you are more likely to get knowledge that a free flight mentor may not necessarily know if they have never flown that species. So I recommend soaring wings training because they helped me a lot when I was actually training my girls. It was actually them who recommended me flying them in trees instead of an open field, because most free flight mentors will tell you to take them to the biggest, openest, emptiest space you can possibly imagine, where they can't land, they can't fly off, they can only do like loop-de-loops or come back to you guaranteed every time. That's not the case. With canopy species birds, they will panic in that situation and you could lose your bird for good.
Mhm.
So it's very, very important, if you're going to find a mentor or going to find someone to help you and guide you, find someone that has already trained that species or has knowledge or experience in training that species. So even though Soaring Wings Float Training didn't directly train me, because they weren't even a business at that time, or they weren't doing mentorship at that time, they helped me a lot. My girls wouldn't be free flighted if it wasn't for their advice. So I do highly recommend a mentor or a guide. If you are going to try and free flight train yourself, which is mostly how I taught or mostly how I learned, find out what it is you need to know about free flight before you get started. What training do you need? What desensitization do you need? How to desensitize? What skills do they need, such as ascent, descent, being able to fly around corners, being able to play hide and seek. So if they're in a different room, they come to you. Recall training must be solid. And then when it comes to desensitization, there is multiple ways you can do it. You can take them outside in the garden, in a carrier. You can take them from a walk around your block in a backpack. There's so many different ways you can do it. And then on top of that, it's a case of, once you've actually got all the foundational skills in place, practice, 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 practice. And by that, I do not mean take your bird outside and let it off. If it is on a harness, try and do some recall training with it on its harness. If you don't have access to a harness, you can genuinely just buy a gazebo and some bird safe netting, like garden netting. Put it over the gazebo, you have a little outdoor aviary to practice recalls in. That's one of the best ways to get started. But if you are going to do that, please, please, please make sure that the netting is solid, so that if the wind blows, it doesn't fly up and your bird escapes. So that's also why a gazebo is good for that kind of desensitization training. So you don't necessarily need an aviary, but if you're going to be out there with them anyway and supervising, it is a great place to start recall training outside, is having a netted area or an aviary outside to do that with. So that's in general what I would recommend. Also, get on the Facebook pages such as Free Flight International, UK Parrot Free Flight pages, and get as much advice as you can from people already experienced with training that particular species.
Sounds like great advice to me. And yeah, the gazebo idea sounds like a very good one, as long as it's secured and make sure it's safe. The only other thing I'd add to that, because the only thing I can really add to, because you know a lot more about free flight than me, is don't be afraid to take your time and work on all those foundational skills in your house before you take it anywhere else, because it's always helpful to train foundational skills. A lot of our birds have a lot of foundational skills, even though we don't intend to free fly at this point. So again, it would increase their odds of survival out there, because they've got a strong
Agree.
recall, they've got ascent and descent training in place already, and they are desensitized to a few things. And we also take them out in a carrier as well, because we like them to have some fun. So we need to wrap things up because I'm conscious of time. So if there's anything else you'd like to do promotional wise, like shout out your channel, anything you'd like to promote, or where people should find you, I'm going to leave some links to your socials in the description as well if people want to explore. But is there anything else you'd want to shout out on your end?
So again, for anyone who doesn't know, we are Pionus Tales. We specialize in Pionus Parrots and Pionus Parrot knowledge, education, and vlogs. We do free flight vlogs. We do general day in the life of living with a Pionus Parrot vlogs, and we do have a lot of educational series coming out. We not long ago released a general Pionus behaviour 101 video. We've got how to identify a Pionus parrot coming out, hopefully within the next few months, as well as other very in-depth videos about Pionus parrots in general. And we are also, or we've been highly requested to start a trick training series soon as well. So I'll mainly be covering foundational tricks, very similar to what you have on your channel already, David. So things like target training or how to do basic tricks like spin in a circle. So we've got some bits and bobs like that coming out very soon as well.
Sounds like some awesome content. Do check it out, do explore, because there's lots of great stuff on that channel. But for today, I'd like to thank Ashley for coming on today from Pionus Tales. It was great talking to you. If any of you have any questions, feel free to head over to her socials and drop them in and watch stuff. But in the meantime, from me and Ashley, take care and see you later.
Bye.